One of the problems people have resolving conflicts, it goes back to the previous video that I did on right and wrong, and how there really aren't any well-defined right or wrong. This is a extremely subjective situation. Um, but resolving conflict plays into that a lot. Most of our conflict comes from us holding on to fixed ideas about what something is, isn't, should be, should not be. Um, and those ideas are almost always tied to our self identity in some way. This is a fundamental concept of contemplative psychology. It's explicitly talked about in Buddhism, and it really comes back to this idea of no self. This idea that the fixed states don't really exist, like the big T truth just isn't there. The idea of us being like this fixed, unchanging kind of thing, that there is this right or wrong situation, and that it's dire situation. Like, we have to protect this idea of who we are, of this essence of this is me or you. So this plays into most of our conflicts. This is what really drives home the urgency of conflict. When we think that we have to protect this kind of static view of ourselves, of what's going on, then when someone disagrees with that and challenges those fundamental ideas, then what do? Well, we get defensive. We have some fear because that now this idea of myself is crumbling. And what does that mean? What does it mean for me to for you to challenge my ideas, for me to question deep held beliefs, right? And things like a meditation is great for this. Meditation is essentially a practice of continuing to come back to every moment and let go of the previous moment. A thought arises, you say thinking, you let it go, and you come back to the current moment. And something comes up, and you practice letting it go. And something comes up, and you practice letting it go. And that is essentially the crux of meditation. Now you do have to look at things closely. You can end up looking at your breath. You can look at your body. You can look at your emotions. You can look at the content of your mind. But you don't cling on to any of it. You just see it for what it is, and you let it go. This is the opposite of what we typically do. And what we typically do is we have an idea, and then we just hold on to the idea. Like, that's our idea. That's true, right? And then when someone disagrees with it, well, then you have to defend that idea because this is true, right? Especially when we tie these ideas into these ideas of our self-identity. So if it's like, if I see myself as a good person or a kind person, right? And then someone says, "Oh, well, you've done something bad, right? Or you've been mean, right?" Well, now we have to say, "Well, no, I'm not mean. I'm not bad," because if I do that, then I've challenged the whole basis of who I am. Now, am I a good person? Am I a nice person? Am I kind? Right? They said I wasn't. And it's this idea of, am I this person? Am I that person? Right? Is this right? Is this wrong? Right? And from there, we end up in these situations where we get at odds with people. Now, typically, the way this works in real life is that we all have ways that we err. We all have ways that we lean one way or the other, right? And that's natural, right? It has to do with our upbringing. It has to do with, kind of what we've learned as we've gone along, our culture, all of these things. And when we disagree, it's because we're coming at it from two very different points of view. Now, what I've found is that the wisest way to deal with these things is to try to find something of a middle path. And this is another concept in Buddhism too. And so this is essentially the Buddhist message of find the middle path, and that the middle path is the way that's going to lead to the most peace and love and happiness. It has balance and harmony with the world instead of taking extreme positions. And an extreme position is as simple as I'm right and you're wrong. Now that may not seem extreme, but it is. It's an absolute statement of this is right and that is wrong. I am right and you are wrong. And when we take those positions, we are putting ourselves at odds with other people because the other person says, no, I'm right and you're wrong. And then there we go. A middle path says, well, I believe I've been right here. This is the decision that I made, but let me look at it. Maybe I have an error here, and I believe you're wrong here. But you know, you probably have a reason for thinking this way or doing this. So let me look at that. Right? It doesn't mean not having values or convictions. It just means allowing yourself to step outside of our kind of entrenched ways that we err, our entrenched right and wrongs in our head, and to begin looking at things from a broader perspective. If I think I'm right and you're wrong, then can I look also at how I might also, my perspective may not be perfect. My perspective may have blind spots. Maybe I think I'm right and you're wrong because I haven't fully considered your position, right? And if I do that, if I can fully consider your position and come to see some value in that, right? It doesn't mean that my position becomes wrong. It may mean that I can just develop my position. We don't stick to one theory or explanation of the world when the data shows that there's a better explanation for things. We adapt and change it. And I think that's just a wise way to do it. I've worked with an awful lot of couples and doing conflict resolution, and it's almost always looking at like one person is kind of dug into their position, the other person is dug into their position, neither one are seeing each other's point of view, right? And the work then becomes, okay, so how can you see the other person's point of view, and then how can they see your point of view? And from that, you have this idea that it's better to strive to understand the other than it is to be understood. Because if we're trying to be understood, we're trying to convince someone of our own rightness. If we're trying to understand someone, then we're looking at how can their position have some validity. Now, when we do this, and we do this consistently, and it will change the way we communicate that. It's like, oh, well, I can see what you're saying there. I may not agree with all of it, and this maybe is how I don't agree, but I see you're making this point and this point, and you think this is important or that is important. And when you reach that, and when you can communicate that, it's almost guaranteed that the other person is going to feel more heard. And when you come back and say, I hear what you're saying this. Now, and I can understand where you're coming from with this aspect of it, but this is where I differ here. I think maybe something needs to be focused more here or there or whatever it may be. And then it becomes just a matter of, perspective and angle, right? And usually in a couple situation where there's conflict, both couples have areas in which they could grow, where they could expand their view to where their science of the world, their theory, can develop. And when we do that, we actually begin to see progress in relationships. We see less conflict, and we see a greater level of appreciation of each other. Now, once we have that, and we've begun to appreciate one another in a better way, well, now you have like this opportunity to feel better about one another. And when we feel better about one another, and we can build this increasing sense of, goodwill, this assumption of goodwill, which is incredibly critical for healthy relationships. We have to believe that the other person's not an asshole, essentially, because if we're entrenched in this idea that the other person is wrong and an asshole, or they mean me harm, right? We're never going to have trust, and we're never going to have vulnerability. And that's a real problem in a relationship, any kind of relationship. If you can't have trust or any kind of vulnerability, then you're just posturing, you are defensive, you're scared. None of that is going to help you have a meaningful relationship with one another. So letting go of our fixed views of things, of right and wrong, is critical in developing a better understanding, appreciation for our conflict resolution. It's critical for learning how to get along better in the world. We see this all the time, like especially in our politics. We have extreme views on the right, left, up, down, around the corner, and no one is listening to one another. Actually, in many circles, the act of listening to one another and compromise has taken a very negative connotation. That if you're willing to compromise or even willing to entertain the ideas of the enemy, then you're weak, you're misguided, and you're going to do harm to yourself. That you're giving in and you're going to let them win. Well, when we take that position, no one wins. Everyone loses when we refuse to consider the viewpoints of others. If you want a world that has more love and peace and happiness in it, and even within yourself, if you don't want to be at war with yourself, at war within your own house, then learn to look at the other perspectives. And that doesn't mean you have to abandon your own perspective. There are things about your perspective that are going to be very valuable. And I'm not saying you should hold on to them, but embrace them, celebrate them. Don't shy away from being who you are when there are aspects of who you are that you value and that you love. I think I am an even-minded, I'm considerate, I'm a loving person, I'm very compassionate, and I've worked to develop these things, and I think they're incredibly valuable. I like my sense of humor. There's a lot of things about me that I like. Now, however, when it comes to things like parenting, I've historically been incredibly lenient, too lenient, to the point that it's caused problems. Now, sometimes, that can cause conflicts. Like if someone has a more strict style of parenting, then we're going to be at odds a bit with that. Now, I'm not going to say that the other person is wrong. I recognize there are flaws in my natural way. There are flaws in the way I've done things. But I need to be able to look at both sides, right? I need to be able to consider that although I value some aspects of my perspective, my consideration, my sometimes leniency or gentleness, there are other times when being more firm and resolute and strong in an approach is better, right? And my acceptance of that doesn't mean that I'm conceding that someone else is right and I'm wrong. It just means that I'm willing to understand that my position is not infallible. My position can always evolve. I can always learn. I can always develop new ways of looking at things, while also not losing the essential aspects of who I am. See, it's an extreme position to think that if I consider the input or the value of others, that I lose myself, that I can't maintain myself and what I know, while also looking at someone else. Right? That's an either-or situation. It's not valuable. I can hold myself, I can critically evaluate myself, I can look at who I am as a person, and then say, in this situation, are these decisions, is this action, is this behavior, my body, speech, and mind, am I being the most effective that I can here? In order to do that, I really have to be mindful of what is going on with me and the environment. And when I'm mindful of that, when I'm present, when I'm in the present moment, and I'm not clouded with ideas about the way the present moment should be, but I can see the present moment for the most part as it is, then I'm able to make decisions in a very different way. I'm not going to be bound into habitual patterns that are come from my fixed ideas. But I will be able to respond in a fresh, new, more spontaneous and creative way based on the needs of the situation. I also believe that the more present and open I can stay, the more love and compassion I'm going to be able to channel into the moment. And that always makes my actions more intelligent, more responsive to the environment, and less likely to do harm. So overall, my advice on how to resolve conflict is let that shit go. Stop holding on to these ideas that you're right and they're wrong, or that you're wrong and they're right. That's just the same. Like always telling yourself that, yeah, they're probably right. I'm always wrong. Da 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 da. Well, that's just as unhealthy. That's a self-negation kind of aspect that is going to get in your way as well. That's not balanced either. It's understanding that, you know what? Let me listen a little bit here. Let me try to understand instead of being understood. Let me relax into this and see what's there. Let me critically evaluate my thoughts, actions, right? And then see, what do I want to adjust? Do I like the way I'm doing this? When we can do that consistently, we break out of these habitual patterns. And that has incredible value. If we could, more people in power in this world could learn to do that and to break out of their very narrow, fear-based approaches to life and evaluation of things, then we'd have a much healthier, happier, more peaceful world. If you like this message, if you like what I have to say, then please subscribe to the YouTube channel and keep looking out for more content. I hope you can find peace and happiness in your day. Thank you.